themes of world history. Okay, Monday से आपका मैप स्टार्ट होगा and for that you have to be in the right frame of mind. पढ़ाई बहुत ज़्यादा करनी पड़ती है मैप में, ठीक है. It's relatively कुछ specific themes हैं and then it's all about facts. But let us understand modern world. So modern world is all about isms. Isms क्या है? सिर्फ सोशलिज्म, imperialism, nationalism, colonialism, सारे isms and all that we have to study. Okay, so when we talk about this, these are the various philosophies and then their implementation: imperialism, absolutism, nationalism, communism, colonialism, militarism, as well as fascism and Nazism. So the whole syllabus revolves around these things. आप syllabus का कोई भी part ले लीजिए, ठीक है. If you talk about the First World War or Second World War, it's a combination of nationalism along with militarism. So the whole history revolves around these concepts. ये concept आपको एक बार समझना पड़ेगा and eventually then we can discuss about the important countries. If we talk about world history, we read about the world history of some important countries, है ना? Like if we take Europe, अब यूरोप में सबसे ज़्यादा फेमस कंट्री कौन से हैं? We have Britain, then we have France. These are the two most important countries, है ना, of 18th century. But then when we go toward the 19th century, we see the creation of Germany, and Germany becomes one of the finest or the strongest country in Europe. So it's all about important concepts and then the important countries. Okay. So here the first concept we have is imperialism. What is the meaning of imperialism? When someone is trying to increase the influence of the metropolis or the mother country, that is known as imperialism. Okay. Absolutism is nothing but having complete control over the lives of the people. Like if a state is there, all the powers they are concentrated, है ना, judiciary, executive, legislature, सब कुछ एक जगह concentrated है, and then the rule of the king, it is unchecked by any institution. So it becomes absolutism. Okay. When we talk about nationalism, nationalism is specifically a phenomena, an idea where people of a community, they feel that they have a same past or common history and their interests, they are converged in nature. And this nationalism, the people, they are connected by various themes. Like if we see in India, India's nationalism is entirely different from nationalism of Europe. In India, we have unity in diversity. But if we go towards Europe, if you see Germany, it is unity with respect to 2 or 3 aspects only. Like they have the common territory and then they have the common language and race also. Okay. So there it is not about diversity. It is about the specific segregation. Alright. But if we see throughout world, everywhere the concept of nationalism is different. Then we see communism and socialism. These philosophies, they came as a counter to capitalism. Okay. So capitalism is nothing but ownership of means of production. Ownership of means of production by the entrepreneur or the bourgeois. Okay, so this capitalism has overall influenced the history of humankind. Okay, but during the 18th century, as all of us know, there was beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and because of that Industrial Revolution, we see the coming up of these philosophies of socialism. When socialism could not work, then we have to shift towards communism. Communism came up with scientific ideas, and the most important idea was to strike at the root of capitalism, means private property should be abolished. Okay, all these ideas have influenced our overall world history. Like colonialism, if you see colonialism, the most important part of colonialism is creating colony for the metropolis and then using that part for enriching oneself. Like you see the relationship of Britain and India. Okay, India was a colony and it was used for the betterment of England. Militarism. Militarism is nothing but where a state sees security in creating a very strong army, and then this army is being used specifically as an instrument of state's policy कि हर चीज जो भी अचीव करना है, for that they should have army, and they believe in war as a national instrument. And finally, fascism and Nazism. This is all about creating a totalitarian state, a very authoritarian state in which everything, every aspect is controlled. One important element of Nazism and fascism is propaganda. Okay, where everything is used with the help of propaganda. Like if you see Nazism, they use the propaganda of stab in the back. Okay, they use the propaganda against the Jews, and all this was used eventually for ensuring the power of Hitler. Okay, so these are the various concepts which will affect your understanding of the world history. तो इन सब को जब हम एक बार समझ लेते हैं, then eventually we go towards the major countries. Okay, there are some major nations which are responsible for creating the important events, and these events become part of our syllabus. Okay, like one such country is Britain. If we talk about Britain, one of the earliest country where we see the ideas of Enlightenment. Okay, Enlightenment is nothing but a kind of maturity, okay, or new thinking which came in Europe during the 17th and 18th century. Okay, when we read about our syllabus, there are two philosophers which we discuss. The one is Immanuel Kant and second one is Rousseau. These two are the most important philosophers. Okay, so when we talk about Immanuel Kant, he says Enlightenment is nothing but rising over the immaturity and ignorance of humankind. Okay, so this movement also was percolated to Britain, and that's how, because of Enlightenment, we see the origin of modern politics. Okay, Enlightenment's ideas could be seen in every sphere of life. So Enlightenment it affected every form of life. Like all the political ideals of India which we see in our preamble, it is nothing but an outcome of Enlightenment. If we see today's modern polities, क्या क्या features हैं उनके? Separation of power. Okay, separation of power. The most important person is Montesquieu, है ना? So that separation of power has come because of ideas of Enlightenment. Similarly, all of us know about democracy. Democracy or popular sovereignty. Okay, Rousseau was a very good supporter of this idea. Similarly, there are so many other political ideas like republic, where some of the people, they were against monarchy itself. What they wanted an elected president or prime minister, whichever form of government it is. Okay, then if we talk about social, so they talked about equality, fraternity, okay, end of slavery. All these values, they came during the era of Enlightenment. Similarly, when we talk about economy, so free market capitalism or free market economics, this became dominant. Doctrine of laissez-faire, right for the freedom of profession. Whatever profession you wish to pursue, you can do that. And religion, there is freedom of religion, as well as secularization of the public space. Okay, so all these ideas, they came in the field of Enlightenment in Europe in 17th and 18th century, and this became very prominent, which eventually led to the creation of modern politics. And when we talk about modern politics, every country has different path. Like if we see the case of Britain, in Britain, one of the important event is Glorious Revolution of 1688. Okay, after this Glorious Revolution of 1688, we see creation of constitutional monarchy, and because of constitutional monarchy, Britain was the earliest country which manifested the ideas of Enlightenment. Okay, and this can be seen from the Glorious Revolution of 1688. So some of these positive developments in Britain eventually propelled it towards Industrial Revolution. This Industrial Revolution starts in the middle of 18th century. When we talk about Industrial Revolution, this is nothing but replacement of hand tools by machine tools. Okay, where machines became the main center of production. We had to shift from our houses to the factories. Okay, so all these things happened in Britain in the 18th century. Okay, there were so many factors which we can discuss responsible for the beginning of Industrial Revolution. All of you have studied, batao mujhe, what are those factors? Yes, so when we talk about Industrial Revolution, it itself had various factors. They can be broken into various parts: political, economic, social, religious, as well as scientific. Okay, so when we talk about political factors, Glorious Revolution. Okay, stability of the government, that is very important for development. If government is not stable, Libya wala hal ho jayega, nothing is going to happen. Okay, no development is possible. When we talk about economic factors, so agrarian revolution had happened in Britain and closure movement was there. Because of that, there was consolidation of land holding, as well as coal and iron, they were in close proximity, and these are weight losing industries, and that's why it becomes easy. Similarly, if we see the geography of Britain, it is a island. That's why because of coastal shipping, transportation costs are cheap. Okay, India में आप transportation costs देखोगे from Kashmir all the way up to Kanyakumari, they are very high. Reason being of inefficient transportation system. But if you see in England, it was relatively easy. If we see the social life, the people were of practical bent of mind. So their main focus was on scientific innovations. Starting from John Kay, James Watt, all these important scientists, whatever innovation they came up with, this was because of their unique society. If we talk about the religion, majority of them were followers of Protestant. Okay, and because of this, they give a lot of focus on two ideas. One, everybody should give focus to education, and second, belief in predestiny. So in order to prove that they are blessed by the God, they work very hard, which eventually leads to accumulation of capital, and whenever there is capital, it leads to investment, and that investment they found during the Industrial Revolution. So if we see the history of Britain, ideas of Enlightenment, then Glorious Revolution, modern politics, Industrial Revolution. Because of Industrial Revolution, there was a marked change in the politics of Britain. Reason being, previously villages were the center of politics. Okay, but once the Industrial Revolution started, we had to shift from villages to urban centers. All the important cities which you know, Manchester, Liverpool, etc., all these cities had no political representation. While on the other side, the villages, they were getting depopulated, but they still enjoyed voting rights, as well as there were so many constituencies. Okay, because of these factors, in 1832, they came up with the Reform Act. Okay, and this Reform Act, the main aim was to ensure whatever changes have happened because of Industrial Revolution, that should be considered. Okay, but this Reform Act could not provide a solution to the urges of working class. Okay, and the working class, since it did not get the voting rights in 1832, eventually it led to the creation of Chartist movement. They came up with one charter in which they had 6 demands, and those demands they revolve around polity as well as economy. Okay, so this is how the Britain history we're going to understand this in detail in the next classes. Okay, but this is the situation which we need to understand. UPSC में majority of the question बस यहीं तक ही आते हैं. If we see the case of Britain. Then next comes France. France was one country where we had absolutism. Okay, and when we talk about absolutism, the main face of absolutism was Bourbon dynasty. The kings of these dynasties, starting from King Louis XIV, they were in absolutist in character. Okay, because of this, society was suffering. And whenever society suffers, they ask for change. Okay, and that change came in the form of French Revolution. Okay, France had become bankrupt by 1787. They wanted to change the status, but since the King Louis XVI, he was very weak, he was somehow, you can say, pressurized by the aristocrat to summon a state general. And this summoning of a state general led to the beginning of French Revolution. Once the French Revolution starts, it's not a small event. Okay, it's like a process. From 1789 all the way up to 1799, we see a lot of important events. Okay, within this, they are going to try to create constitution for themselves. Okay, Declaration of Rights of Man as well as citizens, which led to the creation of New France, then Reign of Terror, then the rule of Directory. Finally, this rule of Directory is overthrown by Napoleon. Okay, and he became first consul in 1799. He ruled till the April 1814. Okay, and during this era, Napoleon, he was the main personality in Europe. Okay, so it is often said with the outbreak of French Revolution, the history of Europe merges with one nation and one man. The whole history of Europe revolved around France and Napoleon for around 25 years. So because of these factors, France became the intellectual head of Europe. Whatever reform was happening in France, that was percolated to the other countries. Okay, but as all of you know, Napoleon was in the end defeated by the coalition, European coalition, and the main personality was Prince Metternich. Okay, that eventually led to the Congress of Vienna. After Congress of Vienna, the main purpose was to undo the changes which were led by French Revolution. French Revolution had three ideals: equality, liberty, and fraternity. Okay, and they were to be changed by the Vienna Congress, but it did not stop France in the long run. By 1830, France has again started the revolution, and again by 1848, the Metternich system, which was being stressed upon Europe, it went down. It was torn down by this time. Okay, and eventually we see the beginning of a modern state in France. This is the history of France. France is very important for us. Reason being, UPSC asks question from here, like the overall impact of French Revolution in creation of modern world. Okay, one important element of French Revolution is nationalism. For the first time, we see a country fighting against so many other powers, and still it was able to win. Reason being, now the people of France had a kind of an idea that they belong to one community. Okay, they are all one, they are not others. Okay, this happens very rarely. So this happened in the 18th century in France, and that's why they were able to defeat even larger coalitions. One more country is America. Okay, so America has different kinds of flavors. Initially it was a colony. Okay, it was just a colony, and it gained independence by the American War of Independence from 1775 till 1783. This phase is often known as American Revolution. Along with the revolution, they were able to create constitution for themselves, but this constitution did not settle the question of slavery, and slavery remained a bone of contention. They came up with various ideas like Missouri Compromise, but such compromises, they were undone by Dred Scott case. They were undone by the sharp differences between the northern state and the southern states, which eventually led to American Civil War with the election of Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860. Okay, after that, America's main focus after the Civil War was on its development. Okay, so it was following the policy of isolation, but it eventually came into the First World War. The entry happened because of the initiative of Germany. Germany had sunk one of the boat of USA, and that's why USA entered the First World War. Both First World War and Second World War, they were highly beneficial for America. Reason being, they led to the decline of Europe, and at the same time it led to the rise of USA. So after the end of the Second World War, they had become a superpower along with USSR. Okay, and eventually they're going to fight the Cold War. After 1945, they left their policy of isolation and they fought Cold War. After the disintegration of USSR in 1991, it became the only superpower in the unipolar world. Okay, so this is the trajectory we see in America. These are the various events on which UPSC often asks questions. Similar is Russia. Okay, Russian history becomes part of European history because of the impending Eastern question. They were trying to increase their influence in the Eastern Europe at the cost of Ottoman Empire. Okay, that's why they were in constant tussle. Okay, but at the same time, it was one of the last country to get the revolution. Okay, reason being, it was a very backward society, and this revolution itself is the outcome of the participation in the First World War. When they participated in the First World War, it led to the collapse of military as well as economy. Okay, because of which two revolutions happened in 1917, first in Feb and the next one in October. And after that October revolution is known as Bolshevik Revolution. After 1917, it led to a civil war. So from 1918 all the way up to 1920, for these 3 years, Russia was fighting a civil war. When by 1921 they were able to successfully win the war, they were able to create new economic policy, and finally it led to the creation of Soviet Union in 1922. Okay, but as we can see, this revolution of Russia, it was not a normal revolution like the others. Here the revolution was based on the ideas of Karl Marx, and that's why majority of the countries did not like it. And this is the humble beginning of Cold War. So the background of the Cold War starts along with this revolution of 1917. Okay, after 1922 there was rapid development in Soviet Union. Okay, and by 1941, within next 2 decades, they had become a major industrial power. Okay, Russia remained isolated because it was not allowed to join the League of Nations. It only joined by 1934, and then it signed a pact with Hitler of non-aggression, and eventually Hitler itself declared a war on Russia, and Russia played the most important role in defeating Germany. And from 1945 onward, they started increasing their dominion in the Eastern Europe, which became a cause of Cold War. By 1991, with the elections of the Mikhail Gorbachev from 85 onwards, this USSR got disintegrated. So this is the trajectory which you're going to see in Russia. Then one more important country is Germany. Okay, so when we talk about Germany, you can easily say there were two important powers, okay, which specifically reflected the German aspects. The one was Prussia, other was Austria. Okay, so they were the major powers, but both of these powers, they were defeated by Napoleon, and Napoleon was able to create Rhine Confederation of more than small 300 states. So it became Rhine Confederation plus Prussia plus Austria. This became the equation in Germany. This equation got affected by Vienna Congress as well as the revolution of 1848. Okay, at the Vienna Congress, this Rhine Confederation was recognized, but it was put under the control of Austria. Alright, in 1848, as all of you know, Frederick William IV, he was offered crown by the lesser German state, but this was not accepted. Okay, and after that we see the rise of Bismarck. Bismarck had only one idea. He wanted the Prussianization of Germany. Germany should specifically follow the culture of Prussia. This was the requirement. He became vice chancellor in 1862. He had only one specific policy, the policy of blood and iron. Germany was a strong country. It was industrialized. It was following the policy of coal and iron. So by 1862, when he came to power, it was having one of the finest railway. It was having very less economic blockades. Okay, because of all these factors, they were able to fight 3 serious wars. First one with Denmark, second with Austria, and third with France. And after these wars, they were able to unify in 1871. Once Germany gets unified after defeating France, this led to change of balance of power in Europe. Okay, and this is going to be very crucial. Reason being, this competition which starts from 1871 between Britain and Germany, this is eventually going to engulf the whole continent into the World War by 1914. Okay, German became very active after 1871. They wanted a lot of territories. Okay, like Kaiser William said, the Germany has found itself a place in the sun, and it is my aim to keep this place. Okay, so that's why the partition of Africa and all those important events, they became comprehensive after 1871. Okay, so we have briefly seen some important isms, कौन-कौन से concept हैं. Then we have just reviewed the important countries. Okay, now let us try to connect what are the important themes of world history. Like if we see imperialism, why is imperialism important? Why we need to understand it? क्या जरूरत है बताओ. सब So if we see barring Europe, है ना, यूरोप में भी चलो कुछ कंट्री दे वर अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ अदर कंट्री, rest all the continents they were under the control of European powers, and this has reshaped the whole world history. Okay, the biggest empire was created by Britain. And Britain, they were having empire both in northern hemisphere as well as southern, the biggest empire. That's why understanding imperialism is very important. Second, if we see from the current perspective, imperialism is one state policy in which you're trying to exert your influence on other countries. So it is important to understand in what ways this influence can be exerted. That's why understanding this concept and then eventually using it for the governance of the nation is of prime priority for all countries. Okay, like if you see Africa, we often discuss that even though they are independent, they are not independent in true sense. Reason being, they are still under the control of one or the other nation. Okay, that's why understanding this concept is very important. Okay, so you have to remember these definitions. UPSC often asks these questions where you have to come up with definitions. Like here you can see specifically how the Europeans, they are sitting on the table and with all their knives and they are partitioning the world, the manner in which they were able to carry on. But this imperialism itself was driven by some factors. And what were those factors? God, glory and gold. These were the three important parts where they were trying to increase the influence of Christianity. Like if you see today, majority religion in whole of the world, it is Christianity, and it is an outcome of imperialism. Okay, this is the biggest success of imperialism. God. Okay, then you see glory. Majority of the developed countries, they are in which continent? Europe. So they have won. And finally you see the world. God. If you see the economy also. Okay, even though today, in today's time, these economies are facing economic crisis, but for many years they were at the pinnacle of their success and they became the center of world civilization, and everything happened because of the concept of imperialism. That's why you need to understand this concept. Okay, so when we talk about all these various forms of imperialism, it can be through a colony, it can be through a protectorate, it can be through sphere of influence, or it can be even through an economic imperialism. Okay, so there are various forms of imperialism which has gone on throughout the world. Then when we talk about imperialism and colonialism theme as a whole, there are various areas where one or the other country was able to dominate. Like if we take the case of South Asia and Southeast Asia. So which countries were dominating here? South Asia, we have India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. All this was under the control of Britain. Very easy. Myanmar was under the control of British. Thailand was a neutral country, and the remaining three countries of Indochina, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam. They were under the control of French. If we see Indonesia, Indonesia was under the control of Dutch. If we see Philippines, Philippines was under the control of Spain till 1898, and after the war with USA, it was under the control of USA. Okay, so UPSC के जो topics हैं, हर जगह कुछ ना कुछ आपको concept पता होना चाहिए. These countries were dominated by these important powers. If we see Latin America and South Africa, so in Latin America we have Mexico. Mexico was under the control of Spain. Okay, if we see the South America, so there Brazil was under the control of Portugal, and rest of the countries, they were under the control of Spain. Okay, some of the islands of West Indies, they were under the control of Britain. If we see South Africa, the first settlement, it starts under Dutch. Okay, and then eventually it came under the control of British. Okay. Similarly, if you see Australia, Australia, it was originally inhabited by the native peoples known as Aborigines, but from 1788 onwards, when the first fleet of 11 ships, it reached Sydney, the Australia came under the control of Britain. Then you can see how this imperialism, free trade and the rise of new imperialism has happened. Imperialism has two stages. The first stage is from around 14th to 15th century all the way up to 1871. And the second stage starts from 1871 with the unification of Germany and Italy, where these countries also became aggressive. Previously, they themselves were not united. There was no political unification, so they were not having any colony. But from 1871, these countries also joined the race of imperialism, and it was very competitive. And within a span of time, like if we see case of Africa, Africa is one of the biggest continent, right? In 1870, it was only 10% occupied, but by 1914, it was 90%. This has never happened before. Okay, that within 45 years, you are able to chop a full continent, and this is the concept of new imperialism. Then we see all these countries, we have to also see how they became liberated. Okay, and that case we study in Latin America, like the most famous person was Simon Bolivar. If we take the case of South Africa as well as Australia, here majorly Britain itself has given self-governance. Okay, if we take the case of Vietnam, we have Ho Chi Minh. If we take the case of Indonesia, it is Dr. Sukarno. Okay, so we talk about some important leaders, what was their specific contribution. Then, even though these countries, when we talk about imperialism, these countries, they have become independent, but their developmental prospects, okay, they have been affected by the era or the years of the mastery by these colonial people. Like if you see case of India, अगर हम 200 साल तक उनके नीचे नहीं रहते तो आज हमारा इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट ज्यादा होता. Okay, so we specifically understand how even after the decolonization, when these countries have become independent, they are still underdeveloped. And UPSC has given two specific areas which we need to understand. The first is Africa and the other one is Latin America. Okay, and these imperialist power, they have left so many problems behind. Like whatever specific political entities they created, they were not self-sustainable. Like if we see in the case of Africa, so many tribes were. Reason being, there was no sense of nationality. Okay, if we see Latin America, they remained dependent upon the sale of primary commodities. So all these economic models, all these problems that we have inherited from the past. You see, take case of India. In India, the relationship that we enjoy with Pakistan, who is responsible for that? Britain. Okay, the colonial, the boundary dispute that we have with China, who is responsible for that? Britain. So all these problems have come because of imperialism and colonialism. Okay, so this remains a very important theme for us. Okay, so now let us see one thing which starts with Enlightenment. Whenever we talk about European history, it can be divided into two parts. One is that of Britain or Ireland. Next is continental Europe. Okay, this continental Europe was influenced by the ideas of Enlightenment, and that's how these ideas became very popular in France. Okay, so in France we are going to see the first revolution. French Revolution of 1789. Ideas of Enlightenment had a say in that. Then rise of Napoleon. The all absolute governments, okay, they are reflected by the term ancient regime or ancient regime. Napoleon as a personality is very important. There are two specific areas which we need to discuss. Okay, for Napoleon, the first aspect is that of continental system. This continental system was started by him, reason being he wanted to ensure an economic blockade on Britain, but in the long run it was a very big failure. The second being the various reforms that he did, like Code Napoleon, which led to legislative reforms. Okay, so Napoleon remains important. Then the era of Napoleon comes to an end with the beginning of Vienna Congress. Okay, so again, conservative monarchies, they were able to affect the ideas of Enlightenment. After this Vienna Congress, we see two revolutions. The 1830 revolution, it happens in all of Europe. Similar is the case in 1848. That's why Metternich has made one very classic comment. He says, whenever France sneezes, whole Europe catches cold. Reason being, whenever even a simple reform is done, okay, or any revolutionary idea comes in France, it percolates to Europe very easily. These revolutions tried to undo the system of Vienna Congress. Whatever was imposed by them was to be changed. From 1848 till 1871, this is the years where nationalism becomes militant, which results in unification of Germany as well as Italy. After 1871, Germany became the most powerful country in continental Europe, but it had to face the rivalry of France. This was understood by Bismarck. That's why he came up with the policy of peacetime military alliances. And creation of these alliances divided Europe into two camps. Okay, he remained in power till 1890, and by that time he was able to create triple alliance as well as a reinsurance treaty with Russia. The moment he goes out of his office in 1890, the alliance with Russia fails, and this led to creation of a pact between France and Russia. So the isolation of Russia gets broken by 1894. वहाँ से उससे ब्रोक हो जाता है, and after that, if we see the following developments, Britain, France, and Russia, they created triple entente in 1907 versus Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These two were part of dual alliance also in 18 79, and all three became part of Triple Alliance in 1882. So this is how we can see the continental Europe, and with the mixing of Britain, Europe was in a suicidal mode by 1907, and this suicidal mode became active in 1914. Okay, so in 1940, Archduke of Austria-Hungary, French Ferdinand, he was murdered in Sarajevo, and it led to the outbreak of First World War. This war continues from 1914 all the way up to 1918. Peace treaties then were signed in 1919. One of the most infamous treaties, Treaty of Versailles. As per this treaty, Germany was humiliated. It was made responsible for the war. War indemnity was imposed. So everything which was possible was done. This led to rabid nationalism. Similarly, this Treaty of Versailles did not satisfy the aspirations of Italy. Italy has helped these powers from 1915 onwards. That's why here we see the rise of Mussolini. Both these powers eventually became friendly, and under Hitler, the invasion of Poland in 1939 leads to Second World War, which continued till 1945. Okay, so this is how, if we see Europe, there are two Europes. One is the island part, that is England, and the rest is the continental part. And by 1945, Europe had become very weak. And after 1945, the history changes from Europe towards America and Asia. Okay, so this is what you need to remember. These stories are very important. So if we see the centers of enlightenment, so they were in Scotland, they were in France, they were in majority of the places. Everywhere one or the other idea was coming. That's why, because of these, it is known as the age of enlightenment. All those ideas which I have already discovered. Okay. Similarly, it was also the age of exploration, where various personalities, like all of us know about Vasco da Gama, etc., Columbus, they were trying to explore the world. And after that exploration, we see the rise of imperialism and colonialism throughout the world. If we see the 20th century, so in 20th century, the most epic case is that of Africa. And it was not an economic prowess, it was a very weak continent, and still it was partitioned by these powers. Okay? So, if you see the overall world history, the most important idea is nationalism. And the creation of modern state system is on the basis of nationalism. Okay, so it is an idea and movement that holds that nation should be congruent with the state, or the cultural boundary and the territorial boundary. Both of them should be same. Okay, and this idea of nationalism was responsible for unification of Germany and Italy. This was responsible for the rise of the Eastern question, where the Eastern European powers wanted to become independent. Alright, so nationalism has played an important role. Okay, everybody wants to create their own country. This has been the most important element of the previous 2 centuries. So when we talk about nationalism, the first important part is nation-state system. This nation-state system starts from Europe itself, where England and French, they had become one of the earliest states from 13th and 14th century onwards. Then the coming of the rest of the states. This rise of nationalism in 19th century can be seen in the whole of continental Europe. All these wars were fought for nationalism, nothing else. Okay, then the state building activities in Germany and Italy, and once countries like India and rest of the countries, the national movement has started, it led to disintegration of various empires. Like the whole empire of Britain, it collapsed and it led to Commonwealth of Nations. And the same has happened with France. Then you can see liberation from the colonial rule, all these important powers. And finally, which this we have already discussed, decolonization. And one major theme of the world history is militarism. Europe was under the misconception that war is the only solution to the problems of everyone. Okay, and it starts with this personality, okay, that is Bismarck. Okay, he fought so many wars and followed the policy of blood and iron for the unification of Germany. After this, it became a trend, and this trend is going to affect the whole of the world. Okay, like even if you'll say today there is nuclear arsenal in many countries, okay, and the reason is the same. If we see the various expenditures, so the majority of the expenditure is done by USA, है ना? So जो आज की भी themes हैं, these themes are directly connected. Where we had seen like Bismarck, and after that Bismarck, the main personalities were Hitler and Mussolini. This shows the rise of militarism. Okay, so militarism was responsible for First World War. It was responsible for Second World War. Okay, and finally the concept of total war. Total war, it was a concept which came from General Ludendorff. He has written one book, The Total War, in 1935. As per this book, he gives one very brief summary. The total war means using the total capacity of a nation. जो भी एक nation के पास है, everything can be used for winning in the or succeeding in the war. Where he says that all the soldiers, they fight on the borders. Okay, all the diplomats, they try to create alliances. Secret services, they try to get the information from the enemy. Okay, similarly women as well as old age people, they try to run the home, they try to ensure the economy remains in place. So all these factors, because of this, see the creation of total war. In this total war, there are various other characteristics also, like war of attrition, long drawn out warfare, complete degradation, all of this. Once this war ended, what was required? Unification of Europe. Reason being, Europe was responsible for 2 world wars, and it has realized that. And the most important factor for those world wars was nationalism. So they wanted a supranational body, where majority of the nation, rather than calling themselves as German or French, they call themselves as European. Okay, so this humble beginning of the European Union starts from 1944 with the creation of Benelux. These 3 countries, Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg, they created a union in 1944. Then they created European Steel Community. Then with the period of time, eventually in 1991, they signed Maastricht Treaty, and under this we see the creation of European Union. All of you know European Union itself is now in danger. UK has left it, and then eventually the second problem is at the level of economic crisis. What is that main economic crisis? Energy. Russia has put a blockade, it is not going to provide gas. Winter is coming. Now in this winter they require energy. If energy rates are very high, it's going to affect both income as well as businesses. That's why the biggest economy of continental Europe, that is Germany, is now coming with a $200 billion subsidy plan, and this can snowball or lead to recession in other countries. Okay, so if we see the First World War, majority of the countries, they were in it. Okay, like Russia eventually came out in 1917. All these countries were linked one or the other way. Similarly, World War II, in this World War II also, all these powers, they were involved in fighting. After this, from 1945 onwards, we see the beginning of Cold War. The major reason for Cold War was USA had already had atomic bombs. USSR got it in 1949. Now using atomic bombs, it was kind of, you can say, the concept of mad. So you can destroy each other. That's why they started seeing different theaters, okay, where they can fight, where they can rival without directly engaging with each other. And this fight between capitalism and communism came to known as Cold War. This dominated the world history from 1945 till 1991. In 1991, with the dissolution of USSR, it led to the fall of Cold War. But even in today's time, the place of USSR is today has taken by China, if you see in terms of economic policies. Okay. Again, this topic is often given in general studies: socialism, communism and capitalism. So when we talk about capitalism and socialism allows ownership of private property. Okay, but at the same time, major industries are under the control of government. Okay, but private enterprise in not so strategic is allowed. Capitalism, everything is up to the entrepreneur. Okay, means of production are owned by them. So when we talk about this theme of socialism and communism, here you have to understand two things. First, the rise of socialism. It was a reaction to industrial revolution in Britain. Okay, where the working class started suffering, they started living in slums, unsafe working condition. All those problems of industrial revolution led to the rise of socialism. The initial socialist people, they were known as utopian, because they thought socialism can lead to betterment of the life of people, but it did not happen, as socialism was trying to reform the capitalist society within its fold. It was not leading to any significant change. That's why Karl Marx came with this theory, okay, which was published in 1848 as Communist Manifesto and in 1860 as Das Kapital, which talks about that the private property itself should be abolished, and finally it's going to lead to dictatorship of the proletariat. This dictatorship of the proletariat eventually came in Russia, where the main face of the revolution was Vladimir Lenin. Okay, but Vladimir Lenin, even after winning the civil war, did not specifically use the principles of Marxism. He used the ideas of both socialism and capitalism. The second important revolution which is touched upon by these ideas is Chinese Revolution. Here the main personality is Mao Zedong, and he was able to defeat the Kuomintang party, and that led to the rise of China in 1949. Then there was a severe fight between these ideas. It is often said it was the fight between the hearts and minds of people. Some says I like communism, some say I like capitalism. So this war starts after Second World War or the whole Cold War. It was basically capitalism versus communism. Finally, we see disintegration of Soviet Union and rise of the unipolar world or the rise of USA. And then the similar theme is industrial revolution in various other countries. What are the differences there? Okay, so when you're going to compare them, capitalism, socialism, कुछ चीजें common आती हैं, कुछ चीजें अलग रहती हैं. Okay. This is very important, right? Reason being, the most important reality of reading history is we want to become humanistic. Okay, and there are some personality who have committed such crimes which can never be forgiven. And one such personality is Hitler, okay, as well as Mussolini. And these people, what were they trying to do? In order to capture power, okay, they were dividing the society. And by dividing society, this time they took the Jews as the bait. Okay, and the manner in which they were able to do so, this came to known as fascist counter revolution. Fascism as a word comes from Italy, which means strength. Okay, which means strength or bundles. Okay, but this fascist power did not rise not only in Italy, in Germany as fascism, as well as in Spain as General Franco, as well as in Portugal. Okay, it happens even in Japan. Okay, so throughout the world, these right-wing governments, which were extreme in nature, they rose. UPSC often asks about their policies, what were their end aims, all this is asked. Okay. So if we see world history from GS perspective, GS में कितना क्वेश्चन आता है? एक भी नहीं. आज की डेट में देखो यहाँ पे लॉटरी हो गई है, कभी आता है कभी नहीं आता है. जैसे इस साल शायद कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं आया है ना, 21 में एक क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया था. तो specifically if you wish to prepare for general studies, limit yourself to mainstream themes. Okay, there is one such theme of decolonization. यूपीएससी ने वो एक चैप्टर पकड़ा और 3-4 साल उस पर क्वेश्चन पूछ लिए. एक बार पूछ लिया डीकोलोनाइजेशन इन वेस्ट अफ्रीका, एक बार मलय पेनिनसुला, एक बार कहीं और, एक बार कहीं और. ठीक है. तो वट एवर थीम्स आर मेंशन्ड इन जनरल स्टडीज, वहां से ही क्वेश्चन आ रहे हैं. से इफ यू सी द क्वेश्चन ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन 2015 में पूछा गया था. 14 में दे आस्क्ड स्पेसिफिकली अबाउट द लेनिन. ओके. 13 में सबसे ज्यादा क्वेश्चन आए थे. In 2013 they asked industrial revolution of Japan. They asked about American Revolution. So काफी सारे क्वेश्चन आए थे. 2019-20 एक आधा क्वेश्चन मुश्किल से आया है. अभी आ भी रहे हैं तो फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, हाउ दे लेड टू क्रिएशन ऑफ मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड. सच क्वेश्चंस आर कमिंग. ओके. सो फॉर जीएस इट्स गोइंग टू बी अ लो प्रायोरिटी. कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स पढ़ लो. एंड इवन फॉर दिस स्टोरी ऑफ सिविलाइजेशन वाली जो एनसीईआरटी है ना, वो भी कब है. फॉर ऑप्शनल यू हैव ए होल पेपर. ओके. वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री इज रिलेटिवली स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, रिलेटिवली इजी. अभी जस्ट खत्म करी है हमने. ठीक है. सो ऑल ऑफ यू शुड अंडरस्टैंड कौन से इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज हैं. So if you see optional, there are some key areas from where UPSC asked one question. Like one question mostly comes from Enlightenment. This year they have asked Rousseau, next year it may be Kant. One comes from Socialism. Industrial revolution has also become important. Every year they have been asking one question. French Revolution / Napoleon. Out of this one switch करते रहते हैं, एक साल इस पे, एक साल इस पे. Then there are so many themes after that. Okay, 1815, 30, 48. And unification of Germany plus Italy. Out of this whole syllabus, often only one question comes. Then World War I, World War II. One question from here also. There is always a probability. One from Cold War. देन कंट्री स्पेसिफिक, जैसे यहाँ पे तक जो जितना भी थीम है, दिस इज मेजॉरिटी ऑफ कॉन्टिनेंटल यूरोप. देन रिमेनिंग एरियाज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. इन रिमेनिंग एरियाज में दे कैन आस्क वन क्वेश्चन स्पेसिफिकली फ्रॉम द थीम ऑफ यूएसए. ओके. रशिया, चाइना, यहां से क्वेश्चन आने का प्रोबेबिलिटी होता है. इंपीरियलिज्म, कॉलोनियलिज्म, मलय पेनिनसुला, बार बार आ रहा है यहाँ से क्वेश्चन. ठीक है. फ्रॉम देयर यूपीएससी इज आस्किंग क्वेश्चन. So if you see world history, majority of the topics you can predict. Okay, it's not difficult, it's relatively easy. बट यू हैव टू बी सिस्टमैटिक इन योर प्रिपरेशन. अभी आप लोग जिनका हो चुका है खत्म वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री, यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि इन एरियाज का बार बार रिविजन हो. ठीक है. एंड दोज हु आर गोइंग टू स्टडी विद अस, नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम, इसको आराम से करेंगे खत्म. ठीक है. यू हैव नोटेड दिस डाउन, कीप दिस, इसको फ्रेम करा लो जब तक पास नहीं होते हो. रीजन बीइंग, हमें गलत डायरेक्शन में नहीं जाना है. वी गो इन टू द रॉन्ग डायरेक्शन. टू मेनी बुक can read Ranjan Chakraborty. Small book as per our syllabus covers majority of the topics except few topics of Cold War. And for Cold War you can read Norman Law, that you can read. Okay, उसके लिए वो पढ़ो. बाकी यही है. ठीक है, टॉपिक्स पता होने के बाद भी देयर इज एलिमेंट ऑफ आंसर राइटिंग. So in answer writing, all these important themes, try to fix one introduction. Make a notebook. Okay, writes few introduction. Enlightenment पे आएगा, this is going to be my introduction. This is fixed. Have basic definitions of key terms. Sometimes when they ask you to compare, when they ask, तो आपको definition आना चाहिए. क्या ना कि what is concert of Europe? So you should know कि what is this concert of Europe? The definition you should know. You have to focus on innovation. Learn to create maps. Maps can be made. Timelines can be created. All this can be used in world history. Okay. And along with this, historiography of major events. But when it comes to historiography, the importance in world history is relatively less as compared to other parts of our syllabus. Reason being, we are a neutral party. दुनिया में जो चल रहा है चलने दो. This is just like that. So the expectation of UPSC in terms of historiography is less in world history. यहाँ पे आप बेसिक पढ़ाई करके भी ज़्यादा अच्छे मार्क्स लेके आ सकते हो. So you can always consider doing 2 questions from here. If you see the marks of toppers, majority of them they do 2 questions from world history. Average marks यहाँ से ज़्यादा आते हैं. Reason being, mastering modern history requires a lot of effort and time, and historiography, as always, it's difficult as in comparison to here. Here there are so many small topics. Like Vietnam एक small topic है, बहुत सारे छोटे छोटे topic हैं, साउथ अफ्रीका, अपार्थीड. स्मॉल टॉपिक्स पढ़ के आपको 20-30 मार्क्स आने का चांस मिल जाता है. That you're not going to get in any other part of history. That's why world history remains strategic for your selection. Okay, तो आंसर राइटिंग थोड़ा फोकस करो. जो आपके टेस्ट वगैरह हैं, that you have to write. These are the key theme areas. These key theme areas, whenever UPSC makes paper, they on purpose write one or this एक ही हर थीम से एक क्वेश्चन लेते हैं, है ना. ऐसे आपका पेपर बन जाता है. ठीक है. So that's it in world history. From Monday, we are going to start with the most favorite topic of all aspirants, that is map. Map, as all of you know, how many marks? 50 marks. UPSC will give you 20 clues, 20 keywords. Okay, you have to identify the places, and after identification you have to write around 25 to 30 words. Okay, this is a challenge of map. We'll cover 500 to 600 sites. We'll divide the whole map into various periods so that it becomes very easy for you. You're not going to find any problem with that. There are going to be 2-3 problems which you will face. पहले बता देता हूँ आपको. First आएगा at the level of identification. सारे डॉट एक जैसे लगते हैं, है ना, आस पास में है. So we'll follow one approach which is known as grid. तो आपको बॉक्स वाइज इसको याद करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. This is a very good method of writing. But what UPSC does, sometimes they're going to give you physical map, then they'll switch to political. Like 20 में political था, everybody prepared political. 21 it came physical, फिर सबने physical कर लिया तो political दे दिया. So you have to cover in both. थोड़ा सा change आता है. Reason being, whenever there are political maps, physical में अगर आसपास में site है, even if the site is crossing the borders, पता नहीं चलता है, and you can write the answer. But that cannot be done in political. There you must know कि अगर वो महाराष्ट्र के बॉर्डर पे दिखा रहा है तो एमपी का डिस्ट्रिक्ट तो नहीं लिख पाओगे, इवन तो कितना भी पास में हो, है ना. दैट इज नॉट फिजिबल. तो वो थोड़ा सा एक चैलेंज एक्स्ट्रा आता है पॉलिटिकल में. ओके, सो विल कवर ऑल दीज थिंग्स. मैप वगैरह की जितने भी चीज़ें हैं सब क्लास में कवर हो जाता है. इस साल काफ़ी इजी क्वेश्चन आया था. एंड मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द स्टूडेंट जो यहाँ से पढ़े हुए सब 17-18 के आसपास आराम से कर पा रहे थे, ठीक है। सो फॉर मैप यू डू नॉट हैव टू हैव एनी अदर सोर्स, इट इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड एट ऑल। सीधा क्लास का पढ़ाई करना उतना बहुत है। 3-4 स्किल्स हैं, उनको फोकस करेंगे। फर्स्ट यू लर्न हाउ टू क्रिएट ग्रिड and you have to prepare grid within 2 minutes. That is the challenge. Initially you may take even 10 minutes. After creation of grid you should learn how to identify, and at the time of identification don't waste time. It happens, which we will do in the classes itself. Okay, and finally writing information. It is particular that nobody can remember 30 words for 500 sides. It's not feasible at all. So what we'll do, we'll divide information into 2 parts. I'll give you a list of 100 to 120 sites. For this you will try to remember information. For rest we'll create some templates, some generalized informations, and that can be used very easily. ठीक है, तो process by process we'll be able to complete it. We're not going to find any problem. Next whole week is dedicated to map. 5 दिन हम यही करने वाले हैं. The time will shift back again to 2:30. ठीक है, 2:30 शिफ्ट कर देंगे और उसी के बेसिस पे आपको क्या लेके आना है. देखो अभी तक तो क्या था, आपको बस फिजिकली यहाँ प्रेजेंट होना था, लिखना भी कम पड़ता था. ठीक है, बिकॉज वी फॉलो दी हैंडआउट्स. एक स्केल लेके आओगे, बस छोटे वाला लेके मत आ जाना 51, तो पूरे दिन बस ऊपर नीचे करते रह जाओगे. इवन इन एग्जाम यू शुड कैरी इट. आई यूज टू कैरी इट. कितना भी बेकार दिखे पर लेके घूमना है. रीजन बीइंग एक बारी में लाइन लगनी चाहिए, अदरवाइज टाइम वेस्ट होएगा. तो यू शुड हैव अ स्केल. ऑलवेज कैरी अ पेंसिल आल्सो. ओके, स्केल एंड पेंसिल आर रिक्वायर्ड. मैप वगैरह जो भी होगा दैट वी विल प्रोवाइड इन द क्लास इटसेल्फ. विल गिव यू कॉपी ऑफ ब्लैंक मैप, पॉलिटिकल एज वेल एज फिजिकल. इसकी आप कुछ कॉपीज करा लेना सो दैट यू कैन प्रैक्टिस एट होम. क्लास में तो हम आपको दे ही देंगे, क्लास में कोई दिक्कत वाला बात नहीं है क्लास के लिए, बट एक एक आप घर ले जाओ, उनकी 50-100 कॉपीज करा के रख लो सो दैट यू कैन प्रैक्टिस इट टिल नेक्स्ट मेंस. और उसके बाद फिर लेट्स सी सिलेक्शन ही हो जाए, काम खत्म है ना. इट्स नॉट अ वेरी कूल थिंग. हर साल मैप करो बैठ के, राइट. चलो फिर आज के लिए इतना ही करते हैं. जितने भी न्यू स्टूडेंट्स हैं, आई होप कि सब्जेक्ट का इंट्रोडक्शन तो समझ में आ गया होगा कि व्हाट द सब्जेक्ट इज ऑल अबाउट. नाउ विल स्टार्ट विद द मेन क्लासेस. नेक्स्ट वीक मैप करेंगे, उससे नेक्स्ट वीक विल स्टार्ट विद एंशिएंट इंडिया. ठीक है.